لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا فعلمنا يا رب، ولا فهم لنا إلا ما يا رب ففهمنا يا رب. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد الفاتح طيب بس ask heard the answers phonetically. Like clear, good, better means reason. طيب جزاكم الله خير. Thank you for coming on this very warm Canadian night. With everyone probably be better sitting at home, بس جزاكم الله خير. May Allah reward you. طابا ممشاكم وتبوأتم من الجنة منزلا. I give you the glad tidings of the famous hadith. You probably heard it, the khawatir in your studies and khutab. Right? من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له طريقا إلى الجنة. Whoever seeks a path wherein to seek knowledge, then Allah will ease a path for him or her for paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us. Alhamdulillah. Yes. Sorry. Don't worry, this is a common challenge. Unless I'm giving a khutbah, I don't speak loud. No one hears me. Not on WhatsApp, not on it. My kids hear me well. Just beyond that, no one hears. Like, better now? Yes? Like, if needed, just tell me, I'll unclip it, I'll put it next. I'll just hold it, okay? Like, so welcome to this course, inshallah, Introduction to Knowledge. Is everybody here part of the IDA? No? Yes? No? I know? No, in general, like, been in our courses before. Like, so the point of this course in a nutshell, yani, if people aren't familiar with the IDA, it's the program that's running here, starting classes in Aqidah, fiqh, hadith, so forth. Sheikh Adnan has been chasing me for a while to assist Jazakallah khairan. So I did some thoughts and discussions with him and the rest of the team. And what I said is something preliminary before that, something I did, I'll point to the slides in a bit, that various institutes choose sometimes as learning programs to start as their beginning program. Some of them would do this beginning program that overviews the Islamic science, and some of them would merge in it the personal obligatory knowledge that you would learn, or they would do that as a subsequent class. So they tell you what's going on. Okay, now start with your obligations, learn those, and then, oh, here are the tracks. And the tracks are very similar to what you've been exposed to here or elsewhere if you follow the learning institutes. And then it will go that way. The nice thing is if no one has studied before, if anyone you haven't studied, or you like to consolidate things, this kind of is the course that takes a bird's view at the won't go into the details of fiqh, won't tell you ahkam, it won't tell you why scholars of Islam, for example, defended Islam against the philosophers, taking the history of Aqidah. It won't speak to you about grammatical parsing. You know what I mean? These are the details you would take in the actual subject. This is a bird's view on almost like why. Why did these subjects come be? Open the Quran and Sunnah, that's it, right? Or can't I just ask questions and get answers? Or why did all these details develop? Or, for example, no, maybe you know this already. What's the most important science? Maybe you know the answer that what's the and how do they work together or what's missing? So people have different considerations. Hopefully this class would kind of cover these, and hopefully, I hope it's motivational as well. The motivational piece, I hope, kind of happens implicitly. You gain an appreciation of the Islamic sciences and the great effort that the ulama went through to develop them. Hopefully that would either tug you along in continuing studying, or that you get started. Right? And I hope also to get a point across that we can all study, and we can all wear the nerd hat comfortably, even if you don't want to put it on you. And announce it. Why? Because everyone can benefit from learning. Slow learner, you're a fast learner, or sharp learner, surface level, wherever you are, everyone can learn. The beauty about the Islamic sciences, they get us to learn about them, obviously, learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are sciences that draw us closer to our creator. We just heard of thought, right? We want to draw closer to our creator. While other subjects might be harder or easier, depends on what they are, to draw closer to the creator. Obviously, everything can be, inshallah, if turn it that way. But obviously, it's much easier in I have to give acknowledgement. One of my teachers, Sheikh Yusuf Wahab, who يعني, I did this the most with the longest. I did this with another online, kind of a similar course with an online institute as well. And he's the one who also pointed to similar references to schools. One that he was involved with in Egypt, that a bunch of young Azhari shaykh started as a learning effort over there to teach primarily university students. So they were exposed to people who weren't, and they would have this. Became very famous even within certain circles. The Dawra Tamhidiyya al-Ulum al-Shar'iyya, the preliminary series in the Islamic science, okay? And others. Sheikh Ahmed al-Dabbouri, I have to pay them. This is not my good work. Like the slides and the content and whatever, I'm just paraphrasing, changing things around, uh, adding things from notes here, from notes there, maybe taking something out. Not, but the content, the bulk of the content has happened in various kind of learning experiences. So the credit goes to them. May Allah reward them. Obviously, the credit goes to the organizers of the IDE, Muslim Business Network, for setting this up. Yeah, because primary role. Please remember them all in. طيب. I already kind of said this, so I don't want to go through all this, right? What's the main idea of the whole thing? I'm going to take the whole series as a whole. We want to appreciate the Islamic science, right? Appreciate the effort that the ulama put in this. Understand the classification. Obviously, subjects, you can just kind of mention subject names, but like university or college, everything has classification. These are the natural sciences, logical sciences, the health sciences. So we find that there are classifications of the Islamic sciences. Okay, right? So the classification will help us with the focus on and help us with the purposes of the ulum. Okay, we'll get that in a second. So this will help us, inshallah. And that helps us even know why we study certain things and how to approach them. Right? And understand the scope and the objective of the various subjects when they come together. One of the problems that sometimes happens, or frustrations, that people go to a specific subject thinking it will give them the answer to something and it doesn't. That's why a lot of people don't like Arabic grammar. Arabic grammar, the point of it is not to teach you about the beauty of it, although it will from far. It teaches you more about the soundness of it, especially the soundness of the ending of the word. If you're working at that all the time, you're like, well, okay, it's helping me a bit, but I'm still not tasting the meaning. But that's not where you find it. You're gonna bang your head with that, and that's why a lot of students, especially if they're exposed to a homework-centric, exposure of grammar, they end up not liking it. Like many myself. When you understand grammar's role and then how it plays with other ulum, and then how all of that helps you learn language, then all of a sudden, like language studies was like ew, right? Or oh my god, I find them dry. Now they're no longer dry because you're knowing where to look and how much. Right? Sometimes you just need to look up a reference. You're looking up like something you look up in the dictionary, and something else you might need to train on, study, okay? And so forth. That was just an example. Same thing with hadith studies. Hadith classification won't help you with meaning, but the commentary of hadith will help you with meaning, and it might be, depends on the kind of commentary, it's very short, so it doesn't talk about the classification so much. If you want to talk about the criticism of the hadith or the study of the narration of the hadith itself, it won't be there. Or for example, here's a third one I didn't think, or qira'at. The ilm al-qira'at, a lot of people take it as only narrative, which is kind of true. Yeah, it's an ilm that you take from sheikh. You can't learn it by yourself. Even if you read it from a book, you want to check how you're reading it. But ilm al-qira'at comes into meanings. Why? Because when you know the variations and the different changes of the words, it adds richness to the meaning. That's why people who study qira'at, they focus on meanings and the grammatical origins and the different dictionary meanings of some of the riwayat. Then they appreciate the Quran even more because they know this ayah can be read like this and like this, and this makes the meaning richer like that. Right? So even something that it looks outwardly as rote, and you're just reviewing and you're doing your ahzab and your wird. No, it enriches your ulum. Right, and to have an informed background on the subjects, and hopefully to get motivated. Right. So these are the 4 main points for today. Why are we attending? We might have covered that. We're going to cover Hadith Jibreel, inshallah, and why is it central to the subject that we're talking about. What do we learn from the subjects that are presented to us on the slide? Hopefully that will close. It's easy, and some of you probably already. And how can we organize knowledge? I want to organize it in my head. and I'm able to count it in one or two phrases. Can I do that? Hopefully that will cover today. And what's next? Inshallah, like the subsequent week, because this is introductory. Every week will be dedicated to one of the ulum, and obviously not all the ulum, because it's a 10-week designed to finish by Ramadan. So hopefully, I'll show you what I plan to cover the next week. I can't remember if I put it on the Google introductory message. If I did, then it's there. If it's not, you'll find it on the slides, and then I'll put it. So let me actually take that and ask you. Interactive, then we'll. Why do people learn? Forget Muslim. Let's just take a step back. Why do humans learn? Do you have any? Why does anyone learn now away from Deen? Just humans, neighbors, classmates, co-workers, people that you know, people you've met in the library online. MashaAllah. Like, so there's a human trait of domination and power, and knowledge is power. You know? Yes. Curiosity. Humans have curiosity. So to fulfill the curiosity, they start learning. You know? To get a job. Yes, economic reason. A lot of people learn for a very long time to get a job. Any more? Maybe the fourth one. Like, yes, to be able to connect with other people, and you'll see that that's one of the categories, inshallah, that is chosen for this series to organize that. Obviously, I put those as question marks, but here's some. So curiosity, satisfying the intellect, improving life, right? Give health or other subjects. Someone said, work and economic benefit. Boredom. A lot of students I would come by when their parents get mad and they take the internet for a long time. I was very bored to the degree I actually opened a book and read it, right? Boredom can make you learn, right? Which is actually good. So that's benefit. But fads, we'll get into political fads, social media fads, or whatever. It makes them learn. Something becomes a trend, so they start looking up, whatever, right? Or reactions, right? People have been learning about Islam or Palestine with the event, right? Obviously, and this is not meant to be exhaustive, but people have an instinct to learn, regardless of what it is. A reaction, right? It's something innate in the human, right? Part of it. Why do Muslims learn? It's all known. Because knowledge is worship. Knowledge is not just seen as an act, cognitive act. Knowledge is worship. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised the ulama. They are the people that have khashya. They're the ones who have reverence of Allah. Knowledge is a means for taqwa. How can you avoid what Allah doesn't want and do what Allah requested from you without knowledge? You can't. There is a minimal knowledge that we all need to actually respond to the answer of how do I obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To attain the virtues of learning that we know about in the deen. There's other virtues that are general for the human, but there's virtues that are part of learning itself. We hear that learning helps us become more sincere, right? That learning helps us become more spiritually aware. People who learned remember the akhirah more, right? So even the khatar of just now. People who are learned, look at the Prophet ﷺ said, that I know what you don't know. I hear, I see what you don't see. The Prophet ﷺ is relating to us things from the unseen that we can't. That's the primary role of the prophets. The prophets did not come to relate to us the seen world. They relate to us the unseen world. Taught us how to see the seen world in a way that makes us remember the ultimate life, the life of the hereafter, and the ultimate life, the real life even while here, the real life while one is here is what that they are in service of the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And this happens through ulum. Right? In a nutshell, ilm is what is a human need, whether a primary need or a reactionary need, right? And it's a shara'i duty. Just as obviously general, right? But then obviously not all parts of knowledge are obligatory. Okay, this is something to Allah to start. I already said this, that we want the big picture, inshallah. Overview the subjects prior to study. And a lot of mashayikh, that's their first lesson anyway. If any of you look at the books of commentaries, a lot of the classical books of commentaries, especially after a certain era, they always start the beginning of the book with the 10 investigative principles that I'll present at the end. They take an overview of the subject before actually teaching the specific text that they're going. So introducing ulum was the act of the ulama in general, whether they're teaching you specific ulum, or they actually sometimes even dedicated books to them. So some mashayikh actually wrote books in this manner as well. They'll introduce the ulum, or they'll introduce a very specific part of ulum. They'll take a specific branch and introduce. So whether there are introductory works, right, or whether this was a habit, the scholarly learning of scholars, or just a general benefit, this is something that we want. Okay? And if not acquainted, maybe this wasn't mentioned before, if any of the subjects are mentioned that you're not acquainted with, this will give you at least a dosage of each one. And then hopefully, if it's offered later as a course, or you saw that, oh, it was offered before and I should be taking this, this hopefully motivates people to enroll in Allah further. طيب, let's take the central hadith of the Sunnah, Hadith Jibreel, right? Anyone not know Hadith Jibreel? You don't be shy. You can, if you want to raise your hand. You know Hadith Jibreel? I hope. If not, alhamdulillah, it will be presented for you. Hadith Jibreel is a famous hadith in which Sayyidina Jibreel asked the Prophet ﷺ certain questions, and the Sahaba did not know who he was, and the Prophet ﷺ told Sayyidina Umar at the end who he was. Okay? So it is just probably in Arabic, I think. English? Okay. We'll see what the essential topics in Hadith Jibreel are. Yeah, and what they matter in terms of the context of this. Okay? This is not a commentary on that. وعن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرف منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه وضع يديه على فخذيه قال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. We know, right? قال أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة تصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. قال صدقت. فعجبنا له يسأله يصدقه. Yes. أن أخبرني عن الإيمان. قال أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. قال صدقت. قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. قال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. قال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. ثم انطلق فلبثت مليا أو فانطلق ثم لبثت مليا فقال يا عمر تدري من السائل؟ قلت الله ورسوله أعلم. كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Right? And this is the version, the famous version narrated in Muslim. You might find other variations in the collections of hadith, but it's very famous hadith to the degree that the ulama called it Sunnah. Just like Al-Fatiha is Quran, they said this hadith is like Sunnah, central hadith of the entire corpus of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ahadith. So that's good. Forgot to put it in translation. Okay, so let me translate it. For God's soul, Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab basically said that one day while we're sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, a man came that is wearing extremely white clothes and extremely black hair. And the description is said for a reason. Why? Because he said we don't know him. Medina was very small, so everyone was known. So if this is a person that's not known, it must be a traveler. But we don't see any traces of travel on him. Traveler will be disheveled, maybe dusty, something. There's no traces of travel and is unknown. Not only unknown, a stranger would probably sit on the side. Come and sit on the side. No, this stranger came right to the most important person in the majlis and sat right in front of him. Put his knees to his knees, hands on his thighs, meaning his own thighs or the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ. Either he's sitting like as if he's asking him, pleading with him, or he's sitting the sitting of adab, like we sit in tashahhud. And he asked him he asked him four main questions. What is Islam? So the Prophet ﷺ answered with the pillars of Islam. And what is Iman? Then the Prophet ﷺ answered with the 6 pillars of Iman. And he kept attracting the wonder of the Sahaba because he kept saying, when you ask a question, you don't know the answer, right? So you get the answer, say, yeah, you said the truth. This person that's asking and confirming. And then after he was done, he asked a third question, what is ihsan? What is spiritual excellence? Or what is excellence? He said to worship Allah as if you see him. You can't behold him like that, and know that he sees you. And then he asked him about the hour. So the Prophet ﷺ answered that the questioner doesn't know more than the question. He said, okay, tell me its signs. And he gave him 2 signs. Signs of the rising of the hour and that تلد الأمة ربتها, right? That the free slave would give birth to her master, right? They said either this happened literally, which did happen in history, or that this is metaphoric for the loss of respect, familial ties, respect to the parents, respect to moms, and that unfortunately, right? And then he went, and when the Prophet said, did you know who it is? Allahu Rasuluhu A'lam, right? And that was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion. These questions are the central questions of religion. what do I do, what do I believe, and how do I become? Especially these. And these three became the three central ulum that are obligatory for us to learn. Right? No one can believe in Islam unless they know what it is. A lot of us are blessed to know that. So that's belief. You don't just believe and you don't do anything. You need to know the rulings, at least of Tahara and Salah and Siyam, for example. They happen all the time. Maybe Zakah is not obligatory upon you. It is. You must learn it. If Hajj is not obligatory on you yet, then okay, it might not be obligatory now to learn about it, but as soon as it becomes obligatory, as soon as Hajj is incumbent upon you, then you must learn. How are you going to go do the steps? And that became the science of fiqh, mainly, right? Fiqh gives us the description of the ibadat, what's essential, what is recommended, what breaks the ibadah. So ihsan is the Islamic spirituality, tazkiyah nafs, purification of the heart. These three central ulum are the aims. They're not the aims. The Prophet ﷺ would not center them out as the main components of the, right? And a lot of the other subjects, we're learning them to actually reach those. Okay, so this is a chart that the Mashaykh would come up with, that the Islam, Iman, and Ihsan are the three main terms found in the Hadith. You skip to the third line, these became later the subjects of fiqh, aqidah, and tazkiyah. And obviously, fiqh can be very short manual and it can be entire encyclopedia. You can learn it at the level of a fiqh expert or a very, very engaged fiqh student, or the beginner that just wants to learn the furud and go back. And same thing with aqidah. Aqidah can be taught in one lesson. Literally all the texts that teach furud are like a page and a half, right? Or it can be taught as a standalone subject that you take in 10, 12, 14 weeks. Or it could be your specialty that you study book after book and book after book, and then you start comparing Islam with religions and comparing Islam with modern issues, and you won't finish. That will be your area of study. After your entire life reading all the books that relate to Aqidah in any way. Tazkiyah is probably the most essential from them. We'll come to that. Single it out. Tazkiyah is actually, and I'll say this later in a future week, Tazkiyah is actually the easiest probably to learn from them. Aqidah might have definitions or certain concepts that people kind of struggle with. Fiqh is much harder. Fiqh is very hard in detail and very fast in motion. So you can take wudu over like 6 weeks, wudu and ghusl and whatever, but when you actually apply it, you go to the washroom, it takes a few minutes. Right? You're detailing what you do in a lot of necessary details for that kind of study, right? Tazkiyah is exact opposite. There's nothing cumbersome about it. Someone can give you a lesson about khushu'. Well, none of us are really applying. We're talking about the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not something you study intellectually only. It needs to sit here. And when it sits here, it's going to come out over. Right? It's a very interesting. Now, what's interesting about this hadith as well, it's not only encompassing of the deen, it's not explicit in the hadith, it's encompassing of us. We are a body, mind, and soul. Islam speaks to you in each part of that. So if you want to be well-rounded, you have to give the body and the mind and the heart their due. Obviously, the heart is the most important one from a general angle, right? And طبعا, there's other angles, obviously, from the most essential out of the three. Aqidah is the most essential to get you going. And fiqh is probably the one that takes the longest actually to study, along with tazkiyah. Fiqh to master intellectually, but tazkiyah is the thing that you do until you die, right? The purposes of them, we'll talk about purposes of the ulum in general. We learn about halal and haram, right? We learn about the outward action, generally to improve life, right? We don't study with fiqh, we don't pray with fiqh, for example, our lines would not be organized. No one is following imagine that chaotic salah. Everyone is just like, oh, I just want to, well, I'll pray the third rak'ah faster than everybody else. Well, I'll decide to read Al-Fatiha loud, and I'm going to really scream it today because I'm not in the mood. And the third guy decides to jump up and down. Well, congratulations. One probably might have ruined the salah. Second is, bugging everyone else. We kind of take it for granted, but what fiqh has done for Muslims, or ought to do, is it makes the earth or the land or the environment that we're in healthy, right? Whether it's essentials or even in its details. Because fiqh doesn't only talk about worship, it also talks about family law, it also talks about, how to deal with crimes, how to deal with international relationships. It's really it covers all of it. Right? Aqidah answers the main questions. It satisfies the mind. People are settled rather than pretending all their life and they've never really fulfilled the big questions of life. Right? And you have the element of the heart. So knowing God, purifying the soul. And you can see actually, sorry, I went on that. Just it's important. Try to remind yourself of that while you study. A lot of people sometimes do one way or the other. Every now and then, if you find an area that's lacking, try to pull it with its proper. Like if we know, okay, Aqeedah, fiqh, and tazkiyah are the aims, how do they fit within the Islamic science? Okay, and how do the Islamic sciences fit with knowledge? That's right. So first, we have divine revelation. Our relationship with this world is that Allah is the creator, and Allah has not just created the world, He has communicated to humans through prophets reality. That's a big difference between us and non-Muslims, right? Like, these are the Sharia signs, right? They're based on wahy. Right? But what else has Allah given us that we have developed and learned? This is a four subject kind of approach. There's many other approaches to classify. This is easy and it's a working. Linguistic science, right? So somebody said something about interaction. So how are we going to interact if we don't know how to speak? You speak one language, I speak one language. And how do we speak properly that language? So linguistic sciences. But then it's not only linguistics, right? I want to understand behavior. So there are the social science, a little bit wider. These humans that I'm interacting with, societies, and so forth. But then this society lives in an environment, so there are also natural science. Okay? Think of this of everything related to the world, whether the theoretical part of it or the applied part. Okay, let's take each one and just go through examples. Let's take linguistic. So in the linguistic sciences, remember this is general, right? It doesn't only apply to Arabic, it applies to any subject. But obviously you can put it to Arabic if you want. That's your. So you have authenticity. There are subjects that tell us something is right, like grammar. This is right grammar. This is wrong grammar. This is proper according to morphology. This is proper use of the word, or not, right, and so forth. And the rest, عروض, orthography and etymology, the origins of words. But then there's the beauty side. There are ulum that serve the language so that we know it's right, written properly, spoken properly, used properly. But then there's also the element of beauty. How do I write with style? How do I write without so much repetition? How do I write in a concise fashion? And these are the kind of ulum that give me poetry, description, writing courses, rhetoric, literature as an example, like, pick up from it examples of good essay writing, good storytelling, or whatever. Then you have the social side. But this can include all of these things. In a way, you can classify history here, although colleges and universities break these up into more departments. All these kind of social science, they, humans since the earliest of times have developed and documented and posed and argued about these things. Why? So that it becomes, so that we can understand our interactions together and also propose what is the best, right? So whether it's psychology and the behavior, right, or sociology, the broader look of how societies form and function, or other more detailed stuff like administration, law, so, right? And by the way, this is why fiqh, for example, is very broad as a subject because it goes into a lot of these details, like economic, law, art, so, right? But obviously, it doesn't look at them as alone. It takes the area related to our behavior and then does that. Like natural sciences, you've got the essentials and applied. That's one way to look at it. So the essentials are kind of the basic topics that if you like science, probably studied, and applied are more, that we're all living in a technological world. A lot of the technological applied implementations of that. So the more applied forms of these subjects are there. Things like engineering, programming, parts of pharmaceuticals that are not theoretical, whatever. These aren't my area, but we get the idea. If there are ulum that talk about the natural world, right? So this is just in general. Go back. We'll see the Sharia sciences again, but with detail. Think of all these together, right? The centrality is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remind yourself again that that's one big difference between you and others. While others might look at the ulum, first of all, they won't look at any kind of religious studies, or they might as a social phenomenon or as a historical thing or whatever, right? But unless you believe that there's a creator and you're trying to answer questions for yourself, you've kind of forgotten this big middle. This big middle area talks to you about the rest. You don't have this kind of idea of separation that I'm just studying these things about myself and then all of a sudden, oh, whoops, we need to introduce ethics classes because there's subjects that are applied unethically. Yeah, because you can't just study things away from their implementation, right? That's why even people who've developed these subjects have looked into ethics, improvements, and you know, effects on the nature, right? Because you can't just study subjects by themselves. They're not just going to roll and become positive by themselves. We all need guidance. Like, just like we saw kind of some of the breakups, the Sharia sciences also have a break. Like, break it up into three main classifications. The fundamentals, which were mentioned in Hadith Jibreel, Aqidah, Fiqh, and Tazkiyah. But let's say I'm one of those curious people. You said that there's curiosity there. How do I ensure that I'm answering correctly in fiqh? I'm going to now write a book in fiqh and produce something. How do I ensure that that's correct? How do I ensure that my explanation of an Arabic meaning related to salah is correct? How do I ensure that, مثلا, my transmission of the Quran and salah is correct? My Fatiha now is good. My Fatiha now is supreme. Great. These kind of questions will be answered by the rest of the ulum. If I'm looking for the sources, I want to see if this authentically is narrated, something that is found or not. This is generally the ulum of the Quran and the Sunnah. They became standalone subjects after a while, right? There's something called the sciences of the Quran, which famously, two of them that are very famous with people that are branches are tajweed, everyone might know, like rulings of reciting the Quran, right? What's another one? Tafsir, for example, like explanation. But ulum al-Quran in general, sciences of Quran, look at all the kind of subjects matter that related to the Quran that are studied under that topic. Right? Ulum al-Hadith, which are covered by Sheikh Ziyad, for example, are anything related to Hadith. We know there's two sources of guidance: Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's guidance was written and separated from the Quran, that you can distinguish. This is Quran, I can recite in Salah, and this is the wordings of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and I don't recite it in Salah. Right? And then there are also wordings of people that help me understand Hadith, so they might be there in Hadith literature. So that's Hadith sciences and the Quran science. But good, now I know the good sources, but how do I ensure authenticity of what I'm saying? These are the sciences of the tool. I need literature and rhetoric, which are part of linguistic sciences, morphology, logic, and usul al-fiqh. Sheikh Adnan either teaching or taught al-waraqat, right? Teaching? He did, taught. Usul al-waraqat is an example of that. Waraqat is a primer on usul al-fiqh so that you understand the theory behind fiqh. Fiqh will tell you fard, mustahab. Oh, this is just mubah. Usul al-fiqh will tell you what is a mustahab, what is a fard, what is a the 5 rulings. Where do rulings come from? How do I ensure I'm interpreting properly? Who does the interpretation? Usul al-fiqh takes the bigger picture, right? And fiqh gives the detail, right? So these are kind of the ulum. Logic gives you sound thinking, and the rest of them, are all related to Arabic, especially these 4. There's a lot of others. There's around maybe 12 main branches of the Arabic language. But these 4 are highly related to Sharia study. You either need grammar for the soundness of the language, especially at the end, right? The ending of the word, right? Morphology gives you more of the word by itself. You can study words by themselves without sentences. You ever did sarf parts? And if anyone is from the Daysi background, the ulama there, they do it memorized. They start reading the sort of tables that they learn, and they'll tell you which form it is: form one, form two, form three, form four. You're dealing with words by themselves. You're not putting any structure together. Then when you know these different variations, now you can easily place them in your sentences, and you're making either no or little because you know morphology. But then rhetoric and literature is how you bring these sounding words and sentences that you learned in morphology and grammar and make them presented in the most eloquent way. Whether your goal is to study the eloquence of the Quran, so first you got to study eloquence and then channel that through Quranic studies, or you want to improve even your own writing. You want to be a good writer, you want to be a good orator. A lot of them do it almost without thinking, but it's a testimony of a lot of the effort that they went through, a lot of the training that they went through, has either taken these subjects in their pure form or manifestations from them that have been maybe modified as training classes so that when they present or when they write or when they work with words, they can appreciate them, right? You can unpack them in a better way. And obviously, the more you know, the more you appreciate the language. And that's why people were dazzled by the Quran, dazzled by Hadith. Why? Because they knew this. So they either taught this so that people can appreciate it, or taught this so that people can learn it. Because they don't know Arabic, they gotta learn that. Okay. And this is what we learned. Okay, put this in black. Remember now. And this again, I already said this. This is the fard out of this. So people aren't, oh my God, I have to learn 65 subjects. Allah, by the time I reach 83, I'll become a beginner. No, that's not the point. The point is, this is just a knowledge map. But what I need to do is essential, a minimum that no one is excused from is these three. By the way, even not academic. You don't even have to do it academic. As long as you know sound beliefs, sound practice, you're taking care of the illnesses of the heart, this is the minimum fard that every Muslim will not be. Based on your circumstances, other things might be furud for. Right? You're a trader, obviously, then the rules of trade would apply. You're someone who deals with people and mediates or something, then you might need to learn something about that. You're a doctor, obviously, you need to learn about health and how that applies to things that relate to haram, right? So the scope of learning grows as your duties grow, whether personally as a person or communally as the communal role that. Okay. And by the way, these three were sometimes summarized in very small manuals that you can put in your pocket. Do I have one? I had one in my jacket. I was going to use it. I can literally, it's a pocket book. It's this big. It's a primarily fiqh text, but the author versified that text to poetry and then added an aqidah section and a spirituality section. That's like a one-stop shop. If you haven't studied anything, that can be subject 101 that you would take in your learning study, right? You can literally put some of these books in your pocket because they're meant at the primary level to be very basic. And that, alhamdulillah, gets your fard going. And by the way, that's much more merciful than other learning experiences that we had when you have to study like 12 years and 4 years and 6 years and 8 years just to do essentials or just to put your foot in the door. Look how the deen is much open for people. But the opposite is true now. When you want to become scholarly, that's a lifelong. Don't mix between two. You want to just learn the furud, it's easy. Prophet ﷺ taught the man who didn't know how to pray in one sitting. Right? That's one skill of teaching, by the way, that you don't take lengthy time to teach beginners or new Muslims. Or no, you teach them in an abbreviated, short manner, get their deen going, off they go. And if they come back for more, then you give more. They come back for more, they give more. But when we want to study these subjects and become a sheikh or become a serious student of knowledge, no, that's a book after book and level after level, and endeavor that takes a long time. People spend their lives just to gain mastery of some of these. Like we're almost done. Right. I crossed off introduction, as you can see there. That's what we did today. And this is what we plan to do, inshallah, the next week. I kept the dry subjects in the middle, or the drier, and I repeated usul there for some reason, instead of Arabic. Number 6 should say Arabic, not usul. Or maybe 4 okay, I'll decide which one to do there. But that's a mistake. So basically, we're going to start with the sources. I think these are easier to start with, Quran and sciences, because I think they're already used. And obviously, Aqidat, Tazkiyah, and Fiqh can be, but I'm keeping those at the end if people like to conclude. things for themselves. Maybe that as a conclusion would be it. And I put maybe the harder or the more less aware subjects in the middle. So if you don't run away, so that way you come back. But this is kind of the breakup in the general. We'll do the sources, the science of the sources, as you saw on the slides in the beginning. We'll do a session each. Then we'll move into 3 sessions only. I can't cover all of them due to time. I'll squeeze Arabic into one presentation somehow. Okay, the point of it is not to take everything, but to take examples of why Arabic matters. Even if you're non-native Arabic speaking, you have no interest in you should appreciate Arabic and how it works in study. Okay, especially if you're going to be a student. If not, at least appreciate that. You take something like that, right? And when we finish those, the subjects that are means, they're the tools that the ulama use, or at least 3 of them, we're going to conclude with the practical ones. That if no one else does but them, that's the ones we need. We'll start with fiqh. Aqidah Tazkiyah, keep them at the end. I think it's a nice to take a spiritual end. And Aqidah and Tazkiyah have a little bit of possible debates or possible different experiences. I want to just keep that at the end so it's easier for digestion and questions. And some things will clarify even before, inshallah, on the other. And then the last session will be a concluding session, hopefully. It kind of wraps up the entire thing. Hopefully, like reflect on how this can be beneficial, maybe practical suggestions for people who want to embark on this journey, or people who have already started things to kind of keep going on. And what I will use in the subject, inshallah, as the main tool is these lines of poetry. These are not the only ones. These lines are mentioned by various ulama, different forms, but they all talk about these 10 or part of them or something similar. صح إن مبادئ كل فن ترى الحد والموضوع ثم الثمرة نسبة وفضله لا وفضله ونسبة والواضع الاسم الاستعداد حكم الشارع مسائل والبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن حاز الجميع حاز الشرف. This is for Imam Sabban. I put his death there at 1206 Hijri. And these 10 are the following. We'll try to use those in every subject matter that we're talking about. So in Quran, in Hadith, in logic, in Usul, Arabic, in fiqh, in Aqidah, and Tazkiyah. Okay? They are had, which is the definition. Had is the term they use in logic, the definition of the subject. I want to know what its definition, so I can distinguish it from other subjects. Right? What's the subject matter? That's the mawdu'. What's the fruit? Be motivated to learn. That's the thamara. The fadl, the virtues. Obviously, all these ulum, because they're shar'iyya, they're all virtues, but maybe, is there's something that signifies this knowledge uniquely than the others, right? The nisbah, how does it relate to the other subjects? We saw already a hint of this. Some of them are just sources. Some of them are things that we're asked to do or asked to perform or asked to embody. And some of them are to give us a certain tool or a skill or an ability. Some of them explain others, one of them corrects others. So there's a relationship in which they relate together. Al-wada, if there's a clear founder or an eponym or possible founders or debate about the founders, maybe you mentioned that. And maybe with that, we'll add a little bit of the history of the subject as well. If there's some kind of history that can be compacted or summarized to give us an appreciation of how they evolved, some of these subjects evolved. Some of these subjects have multiple names. And if you don't know the names, by the way, you might skip a title if you're looking for it, especially if you're looking for older books. It's good to know titles, and they come out in translations as well. So not all translations will use the same term. Some authors will translate and actually translate in the subsection of the book or something like an explanation related to the. So unless they're using explicitly fiqh or aqidah or whatever, you might skip something. Right? So knowing the titles is good to know. And where does it derive from? Does this subject derive from other subjects? Right? That's the istimdad. The hukm shar'i, right? And the hukm shar'i also differs. Obviously, we saw the ones that were going to be personal obligatory, but we'll see cases where it's unilaterally obligatory, something that's recommended, or so forth. And masail, what are the sub-points that are under that subject? Right? Okay, now I know the subject matter, I know its definition, I know. When I open a book inside, or when I attend a class about this, if I would say there's 3, 4, 5 key areas, what are they that I'm getting? Right? That would be the masail. So these are the 10 that I will use, inshallah, in every presentation. and I'm going to contextualize the subject within them. So next week, for example, when I use Quran sciences, I'm going to run through these 10, but related to Quran. Then I'm going to use that again when we use hadith. It's a way to organize what are the principles of each subject by itself. So, yeah, 10 organizing or 10 main investigative points of the sorry. Put that, I think I just put the oh there, the 10 main investigative principles of the ulum in general. And by the way, you're free to also use these in your own personal studies as well. That's one way to review a subject. If you want to just take an overview, if you want to test yourself if you can give a one presentation about Shakespeare or about something, you can say, okay, do I know the 10 main principles of this English or zoology, whatever it is. And if you do, then you have a good overview of the subject. If you don't, it doesn't mean you don't know anything. You don't know. You know, there's some things you don't know, but then you would be able to answer. What don't I know? Oh, I don't know this. I don't know that. Let me go learn it. And then if you learn 10 or some of these, they'll give you a good foundation. Right? That's why I said, وَالْبَعْضُ بِالْبَعْضِ اكْتَفَى. So some of them only focused on certain. Some of them. Obviously, the most important ones are like the name, the shari'i ruling, and so forth. Some of them are more important than others, but together, right? They give a nice overview. And like I said, you'll find these in comments. A lot of the commentaries, the first few pages after the basmala, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah, or while he's mentioning the name of the subject, he'll mention it there. Like, and now we know the name of the subject, the author mentioned it, and let me now mention the other principles. So we'll start talking about it. They'll mention either all of them or, and I meant to get something as an example. Maybe I'll get it in the future weeks. Okay, I think that's for today. Yep, not going any further. I think this is the last. I'm going to say thank you with that. Thanks. طيب, alhamdulillah, mashallah. And I did plan to finish around 9, so alhamdulillah, this is good. Inshallah, for next week, I don't know if every week the slides will be there. I hope you take notes, inshallah. But if they don't, they'll be uploaded every 2 or 3 weeks. They'll eventually make their way on Google Classroom. I think the Google Classroom was sent. Most people accepted it. If you haven't, please check your email and accept it so you can see content uploaded, whether it's uploaded regularly or eventually. You can also see any class announcements as well, if there's any activity. I also intend to try to summarize each week or something like that. And what I'll do actually also before next week is a little bit of a survey just so I know who are the attendees. Because some people might not say much, because I want to know, like, are they attending other classes? So this is their first class. What have they taken before? Just to make it meaningful. So I'm not going into details that don't matter. Right? If I kind of know the backgrounds of what people took, I'll try my best to meet those, kind of make that information that I, and also based on age group, also names that might have been high schoolers. Also trying to make things, make sure that no one is lost as much as humanly possible. Like, since we're done, any questions, inshallah? Before we go? Probably close to this time. I don't think we'll go past 9. Yeah, around an hour. I don't plan to go more than that. I know people are busy. If anything else is needed, take it either on the Google Classroom or maybe select class. Maybe, for example, the Arabic class might go longer. I'll announce before. It should be an hour, but if it's more than an hour, I'll give you a heads up, inshallah, before you. Okay. طيب, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Inshallah, for next week, see you when we talk about Quranic sciences, and we'll do a little bit of a review. Make sure that people know at least the 3 main furud and how they relate to the other Islamic sciences. And inshallah, these 10 points I'll ask if someone knows them. If anyone wants to, by the way, memorize these lines, they're nice. You can do that as your own optional exercise. And as we go through the course, inshallah, you'll use them with all the specific subjects as we go on. Okay? سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. May Allah reward you, and see you next week. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.